Welcome to Saint James on this historic night for us in this historic sanctuary as we welcome Father Laurence and all those who are part of the World Community for Christian Meditation. I'm Father David Peck and one of the priests along with Father Rob and Reverend Lauren and with our co-director tonight, Kimberly Pfeiffer, and on behalf of all the parish, we welcome you to Saint James, and for many of you traveling some great distance to Lancaster itself. It is in the time that I was probably meant to be saying my mantra rather than having my thoughts swirl around my head a couple of years ago, wondering where all of this contemplative prayer business was leading me and us as a parish, that I wondered whether the World Community for Christian Meditation was anything more than a website, and indeed whether Father Laurence actually existed, to say nothing of whether God existed as I was meditating. But I am delighted to say that in this journeying through time, even in this place, we have had ample confirmation that the World Community for Christian Meditation is far more than a website and an app, and on behalf of all of that community in the United States that has pioneered the work here and around the world, it is our joy to be ministering with you. This night is possible because of the simple offering of a handful of people, their time and their desire for stillness and simplicity and silence, and that is what has brought all of us together. And so without further ado, as we learn more about the mystery of silence and contemplation, I hand over to you, to Kimberly Pfeiffer, the welcome and introduction of Father Laurence, and this night she will be giving the instructions and the housekeeping notices that we all need to make this retreat across the weekend all that God and the Holy Spirit wishes it to be for us.
Thank you, Father David. Before I begin with anything, I would invite you now to take out your cell phones, and please make sure that they are either turned off or on silent, not even on vibrate, because with these wooden pews, it will feel like they're still ringing. I also want to invite you, there's kneelers in each pew. If it's more comfortable for you to pull them down and put your feet on them, I just want to give you that permission, because we know these pews might not be that comfortable. So please feel free at any point to pull those down and rest your feet on them. I hear some of you taking advantage of that permission. And I also just want to take a moment and thank all of you for being here. I know that this can be a bit of a busy season, and so to choose to be here for an entire Friday evening and all day Saturday is a bit of a sacrifice. So I thank you for choosing to be here and being with us. Before I introduce Father Laurence, I want to take a moment just to do a very, very brief spiritual practice with our breath. And so I'm going to talk you through 3 deep breaths, and I'll guide you through each of those, and this will just help us to center, sort of gather and collect ourselves from maybe the busyness of finding a spot to park and getting registered and finding a seat. So we'll just start by taking a few nice deep breaths. You can close your eyes if you'd like, but you don't have to. And this next inhale, as you exhale, let go of all that came before this moment. And now, as you inhale, And then exhale. Be present in your body and ground down. And now finally, as you inhale, exhale and allow yourself to be open to the divine. Thank you for that. So as I was asked to introduce Father Laurence tonight, I was thinking about what I would say, and I was reminded of something I've read in one of his books or writing somewhere about meditation, that the best way to learn about meditation is to meditate, to experience meditation, to be in silence. And so I was wondering, I wonder if that is also true of people, that the best way to get to know a person is to be with that person and to experience that person. And so on page, I believe it's 2, you can read all about Father Laurence, but I would like to just allow us to be with him and experience him this evening. So without further ado, Father Laurence.
Thank you very much, Father David and Kimberly, and to all of the friends and community here at St. James's. It's wonderful to be here. And I can now understand why these ancient pews were constructed in this way, because it means I have a captive audience. You're all locked in, I think, to your pews. I think the contemplative life is a very incarnate one, very grounded, not abstract, ethereal, abstract. And this manifests itself historically in certain places, certain parts of the world, at certain times, with certain ordinary people, like us. And it's wonderful for me to be here because I have conceived this idea that Lancaster, and Saint James's in particular, at the heart of the church here, is one of those places where the finger of God has mysteriously descended and has made us aware of what is at the deep center of our faith, and indeed the deep center of all human life, the mystery of contemplation, which is what we are here to both practice, but also to reflect on and to share our experience of and our views on this weekend. So contemplation doesn't happen in the abstract, it happens in time, and it happens in our bodies, it happens in our communities and in our churches, and it happens wherever it may happen. You can't lock it up and tell it where it should happen. The theme of the weekend, Contemplative Revolution, I think was taken from a talk by Archbishop Rowan Williams, which when he was invited to speak in Rome at the Synod a few years ago on new forms of evangelization. And I spoke to him shortly before he went to that. I think he was preparing his talk, and I said, "What are you going to speak about?" And he said, "Well, they all think I'm going to speak about ecumenism, and that would be quite safe to talk about with a lot of religious people, talk about ecumenism." He said, "But I'm not. I'm going to speak about contemplation." And the talk he gave, which I think in many ways was one of the most memorable of the contributions to that synod, in that talk, he gives us a prophetic, a very contemporary, but a very prophetic understanding of contemplation, not as an add-on, not as an optional extra, not as an elitist sort of choice, not as an eccentric kind of dimension of Christian life, but really something that is very centric, very centered, something that is foundational, because it opens us into the true dynamic of the gospel. Contemplation is at the heart of Christianity. I was listening to a talk the other day by a well-known professor of religion. He was speaking very interestingly about different kinds of religion and different traditions. And he asked this question when he came to Christianity: is Christianity a mystical religion or not? And being a good academic, he spent most of his talk discussing that question and not coming up with an answer at the end. I think it is inconceivable that the contemplative experience, there's a little distinction between contemplation and mysticism, but we won't get into splitting hairs about that at the moment. But contemplation is at the very heart of the gospel. And if we speak about the contemplative revolution, we are speaking about it as a way to unleash or to restore or to set free the revolution that is the gospel itself. And it's a unique gospel, and it's a unique revolution of the gospel in human history. We have many histories of revolutions: the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, the digital revolution. We have all kinds of revolutions. And with every revolution, in the first fervor of the revolution, there is great hope that a new world is coming into being, new values are going to be restored or established, that the world is going to be different because of this revolution, whether it's social, political, financial. And then it isn't very long before those creative forces of change and idealism begin to die out. And very often, something quite negative takes its place: the disillusionment of those who believed in those ideals of the revolution, who now discover that human nature is not so easily revolutionized or changed, that old patterns of behavior, injustice and oppression and selfishness come back very quickly into human affairs. And so, with every one of these great revolutions, there has been a counter-revolution, a failure of that original ideal. And the aspiration of the human, the human heart and the human mind is to find a revolution that does not die out, that does not disappoint us, that is self-renewing. And that is what we believe and see, I think, to be the nature of the gospel revolution. It does not die out. We may fail it, but it does not die out. We may try to domesticate it, to tame it, to institutionalize it, to put it into boxes, to lock it into pews, but it will not allow itself to be kept in under those conditions for long. And the contemplative movement within Christianity, the contemplative movements and the schools, particular schools of contemplation that rise up in particular places, like in England in the 14th century or in Lancaster in the 21st century. These little emergences, these wonderful, quiet, but deeply convincing awakenings of the contemplative mind provide the opportunity for that gospel revolution to get out and to do its disturbing work again, to shake us up and to restore and renew our idealism. So I think it's right we should speak about the contemplative revolution, but we should see it as an aspect or as a mechanism of the gospel revolution itself, if we look at it in the eyes of our Christian faith. So tomorrow I'd like to explore with you what we mean by contemplation and what are the particular contemporary conditions in which the contemplative revolution will manifest itself today, and is already manifesting itself. But tonight I want to reflect. First, I'd like to end this talk with a period of meditation. But I'd like to reflect first on how we can be true to this revolutionary nature of the gospel, and to be true to our own time and the demands and the challenges of our time, in particular with regard to this idea of contemplation and the sanity or the health that it brings and preserves. There is a great need for this sanity in our world, in a world that looks increasingly mentally unstable. In some ways, there's nothing new about this. It's just the scale of it and the particular style of it in our own time that is deeply disturbing. But in the 4th century, the archetypal Christian monk, Saint Anthony of the Desert, called his fellow monks to him, and he said, "The day will come when people will go mad. And when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him, saying, 'You are mad. You are not like us.'" Does that sound familiar? And he said this not far from the Sinai Peninsula, where 300 people were massacred a few days ago by Islamist militants at the Sufi mosque at Al-Rodair. And Sufis, as you know, are the most peaceful, contemplative, gentle wing of Islam. The day will come when people will go mad. The word sanity comes from the Latin sanus, meaning healthy. When we feel whole, balanced, sound, perhaps what the desert monks called apatheia, the feeling of harmony, the feeling that we are no longer being tossed from one extreme to the other, and our minds are in equanimity, and we have clarity, and we feel the coordinated, harmonious energy of our being arising in a loving way, going out into the world through. When we are sane, healthy in this way, we are sanus. Even if we are suffering, even if we are dying. To be sane is to be able to face and embrace the entire spectrum of life experience. Not just to cherry-pick the pleasures and the gratifications of life, but to embrace and to find meaning, and eventually, maybe even to give thanks for the sufferings and the losses of life. The playful, the pleasurable, the happy, the sad, the painful, the delicious. We accept them all in a contemplative mind, in a sane mind, with a measure of detachment and a measure of commitment, of gratitude, of thankful acceptance. And seeing this wholeness of life, we can die healed. And our death becomes a life-giving experience for others. I saw this with John Mayne when he was dying. He accepted, embraced, and fully integrated himself with what was happening to him. And it became a gift that has led us to be here today, because it's a gift that entered into the life of what was then a very small little community and allowed it to grow. John Mayne saw that sanity and balance mean, as he said, knowing the context in which we live. So to be sane, to be healthy, means we have to know, to be aware of, to be familiar with the context, the real context in which we live. And this is a specific kind of knowledge, a specific kind of natural contemplation, as the early teachers might have called it. And it's this knowledge of the context in which we live, being able to see the meaning of what we read about in the newspapers or hear on the news, although we might be forgiven for not wanting to turn it on or to read it, but we have to know the context in which we're living. And that knowledge allows us to be sensitive to the presence of God in all our surroundings and in all kinds of experiences along that spectrum of life. He believed that to understand what sanity means, we need to be balanced, to find an interior harmony, that it is not selfish to find this balance, it is not selfish to look for this peace and harmony within ourselves, and we soon discover that it's not selfish because we can only find it if we transcend ourselves, if we take the attention off ourselves, which is the work of contemplation, something we discover very quickly when we begin to meditate. So he believed that to understand what sanity means, we need to work for this balance in order for us to know sufficiently well the world in which we live. And contemplatives throughout history have been contemporaries with history. Look at the great contemplative figures of our Christian tradition. Look at, again, Saint Anthony of the Desert. He had to withdraw, this is all slightly mythological, but he had to withdraw further and further into the desert to avoid the newspaper reporters who were coming after him. And he eventually locked himself up in a fort in the desert and stayed there for 20 years. And his friends delivered bread and water to him for 20 years. Take it with a pinch of salt, that bit. And after 20 years, they said, well, my goodness, enough is enough. He's probably gone crazy by now. So they knocked down the wall, and what did they find? They find him standing there, glowing with health, with his complexion radiant, of sane mind, of clear, lucid mind, and the only physical defect was that the dry bread that he'd been eating for 20 years had ground down his teeth. And how did he spend the next 40 years of his life? Healing the sick, consoling the sorrowful, and reconciling the divided. Now, that little story sounds a little crazy until you realize what it is telling us about contemplation and the work that contemplation involves. It brings us to sanity, to wholeness, to health, and it equally sends us out in a wave of love, of service to others, in an other-centered service of others. This is how we have to understand contemplation, I think. To understand sanity, and our world is mad, somebody's got to be sane. To understand sanity, we need to be integrated. We need to find this harmony within ourselves, to do the work necessary for it. In the Christian theology, contemplation has always been seen as a grace. In other words, as a gift. In other words, something you don't buy. Something you can't turn into a commodity or a technique or a package. It's something that has this freedom of the Spirit about it. It really is a free gift. We don't believe in free gifts anymore, but this is truly a free gift. And in the acceptance of this gift of contemplation, we do know the modern world in which we function. We become useful people and sane people and courageous enough to stand up and confront the insanity and the malice wherever it appears in our world. This morning, as Father David said, I was at the Mennonite school here, and we meditated with 20, I think, teenage boys, which is always a little intimidating when you meet a group like that and you say, now we're going to sit and be contemplative. But we worked our way around it, and we had a very deep meditation with them, and a very interesting conversation with them afterwards. I don't think I could, do anything more useful in my life, really, than just to go from one school to another every day and introduce meditation to a group of children for the first time. Because they accept the gift without thinking about it. They are receptive, and they will do the work necessary to receive it. The only problem about spending your life doing that is that you will eventually run out of steam, and there'll always be more schools you can go to. So we need to find some systemic ways of being able to bring this gift of meditation to young people all around the world. And I'd like to talk more with you about the contemplative mission tomorrow. There's an essential missionary aspect to the gospel. We have to not keep this as some little revelation for our own private use that sets us apart or on a pedestal or allows us to be judgmental about the world around us, feeling comfortably that we are saved and the others are probably not. We are actually charged with the responsibility of going out into the world and sharing the good news of this revolutionary gospel and restoring its vigor. And I think the way in which we do that today, we don't have to judge the way it was done in the past, but the way we do it today is going to be by sharing and teaching the gift of contemplation. The world may be better or worse than previously it was, but it is undeniably more complex. And only if we know what it means to be sane, by recovering what we have lost at a new level, can we recover simplicity and identify the causes of our madness and so be healed. So I'm going to suggest to you that this healing comes through the experience of contemplation. But first, we could let's take a moment to look at some of the conditions today in which we are going to be contemplative and going to be involved in the sharing of this gift of contemplation as an essential aspect of our mission. Why do we feel that the world has gone mad with such unhealthy and inhumane patterns of behavior? Why do we so often feel that we have blown it? We've blown this wonderful opportunity of modernity, of modern life, with the miracles of technology, and yet somehow we have not allowed the world to become a better and a healthier place. I'm not only referring to terrorism or global politics, but out of these very obvious examples of madness, there arises a cry of anguish from the unconscious depths that manifests itself sometimes in the election of leaders who lack vision or sanity, or delivers us into a false democracy in the guise of populism or referendums, or the kind of nationalism, narrow, self-centered nationalism that makes a country like Hungary declare that it will not receive one refugee, not one refugee, because we have to protect our Christian identity. These are expressions of madness. To speak like that is mad. To act like it is mad. So there are manifold reasons for this. One is the emergence of what we might call an instrumentalist mentality in society, in our culture. That means that we see everything as a tool to achieve something else. I came this morning from Georgetown University, where I'm just finishing off a course at the business school to young MBA students, and it's a wonderful way to share, it's a wonderful thing to be able to share this gift of meditation with them and to see them accepting it and learning from it and practicing it. But many of them come very obviously from this instrumentalist mentality, so they speak about meditation for some time as, this is a tool. Somebody said to me the other day, yesterday, when I was interviewing some of them, they said, yeah, meditation is now in my toolbox. Well, if that's how you get started, that's okay. But I think we grow beyond that instrumentalist tool-centered mentality when it comes to meditation. But in this way of seeing everything as a tool to achieve something else, except perhaps entertainment or celebrity, which are ends in themselves. Everything, therefore, has a price tag. We can discover a great painting like Leonardo's Salvator Mundi, but the only interest we show in it is how much it sells for. It was all that was discussed, wasn't it, about it? The value of the price tag. Origen, 2nd century Christian teacher, sees prayer in a different way. And when the early teachers like Origen or St. Anthony of the Desert spoke about prayer, they spoke about contemplation, not about the prayer book or the rituals or the ceremonies or what goes on in the sacristy or on the sanctuary. But they spoke about the prayer of the heart, as indeed did Jesus. When Jesus speaks about prayer, he speaks about the prayer of the heart, contemplation. Clearly, he practiced other forms of prayer, external forms of prayer. He was a religious person. But when he speaks and he teaches about prayer, it is about the prayer of the heart. And Origen says, very specifically, prayer is not an instrument. It's not a tool. He says, in his great treatise on prayer, we do not pray, emphasizing not, we do not pray in order to get benefits from God. But in order to become like God. Well, there's a revolution for you. We do not pray to get benefits from God, but in order to become like God, to be divinized. As we begin Advent this weekend, as we prepare to understand more deeply and to celebrate with more wonder the meaning of the Incarnation, we simply to remember the refrain of the early Christian teachers: God became human so that humans might become God. So we do not pray to get benefits, to get what we want, but in order to become like God. And he adds, praying itself is good. Praying is a good thing in itself. So it's not an instrument. It's not a tool. It is no more a tool than loving your children or your grandchildren. It's no more of a tool than playing music because you love the music, or walking in the hills because you love nature. It's not a tool. It's a good thing in itself. Then he goes on. He actually says, however, or it doesn't say however, he says, it calms the mind, reduces sin, and produces good deeds. Well, those are pretty good benefits. Calm mind, reducing the ego, and allowing ourselves to do good without even knowing that we're doing good. People who know that they're doing good are a bit dangerous. It's people who don't know that they're doing good who are really doing good because they are doing it in a God-like way. God is doing it through them. So there are benefits clearly from prayer, but we're not instrumentalizing it. We are seeing it as a gift with many boundless manifestations. When we approach things as instruments or tools, we're being very uncontemplative. We're always trying to get something else out of it. It's like a lot of people today, they will sign up for a good work or cause or volunteer for something, and they sort of justify it in their minds by saying, this will look good on my CV. So there's always something else, but this something else that we aim for today compulsively is routinely defined not in spiritual terms, but in very narrow, materialistic and self-centered terms. And materialism means simply being limited to what can be measured, predicted, or controlled. Of course, we're not totally inhumane. We still love. We find it difficult to love those who do not love us, but hopefully we try. But our capacity for love today, even for love of those who it is easy, or should be easy for us to love, our capacity for love is very damaged today. In 2009, in Britain, the Mid Staffordshire new National Health Service Trust, became a national scandal. Up to 1,200 people died because of blatantly poor and inhumane care. And when this was exposed, we also discovered that the trust, compliant with the precepts of austerity, was meeting all its targets and balancing its budgets. It was a very effective, efficient National Health Trust. It just so happened that it was killing people. This is another expression of modern madness. The consultant who wrote the report, actually, it was the Prime Minister of the UK brought in, I forget his name, the man who helped with Obamacare, I think. And he delivered his report with 155 recommendations. And the Prime Minister apparently asked him, "Could you summarize this for me? What really went wrong?" And he replied, "A lack of love." So instrumental materialism ruthlessly excludes and rejects contemplation and leads to many forms of madness. And the symptoms of this madness are the staple of the psychotherapist's work today: a feeling of emptiness, of being entrapped in superficiality, of hollowness, of meaninglessness, of self-rejection, self-hatred. And this is increasingly pervading all aspects of life: healthcare, education, economics, daily work, business, and personal relationships. The rates of stress and anxiety and depression among teenage girls, for example, is rising rapidly, with spiking incidents of routine self-harming and eating disorders. And this happens often in a lifestyle, maybe a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle, but where the digital other, or the second life of the Facebook sort of world, is obsessively established and pushes out the real thing. The dependence on social media is related to a lack of sleep, the obsessive comparison of self with others, neurotic body images, collapsing self-esteem, and daily, often suicidal despair at not being as happy and popular as your Facebook friends seem to be. So these are some of the familiar traits of modern madness on the personal scale. And on the bigger scale, institutions, medical, military, or financial, can become so large, so complex, that they begin to defeat themselves, to contradict their own objectives. to become dangerously self-subversive. So it's very easy for us to be pessimistic, and indeed it is quite tempting today to wallow in despair and cynical irony. But the contemplative mind rejects pessimism and despair as an option. Even if we cannot control the external causes, we can determine our own responses. Contemplation demands, by its very nature, that we hope, because it irresistibly generates that seed of hope in even the blackest of conditions. It must seek a way out and a way forward, because it cannot deny seeing that such a way exists, because the light shines in the dark and the darkness cannot extinguish it. So in this light of contemplative consciousness, we can also see intrinsically positive values in modern life, despite the fact that we're surrounded by madness and mad people. There is, for example, in Western liberal societies, the ability to choose. We can choose where to live and how to live, to affirm our sexuality and to live it, to worship, how to worship, or to vote how you wish. Choice alone does not define freedom, but it's an element of freedom. And the degree of madness that affects our inability to choose or destroys our capacity to discern what is best for us to choose can undermine those values of freedom. Nevertheless, it is there as part of our modernity. Another paradoxical modern blessing is multiculturalism. If we cannot see it as a blessing, we respond to it with fear and prejudice and racism and xenophobia. There's no turning the clock back. We are multicultural, we always have been, but now it's happening more quickly all around us. We either celebrate it or we become embittered and inward-looking and violent people. Simone Weil, one of the great modern prophets, understood this irony or this paradox of modernity, that we have great gifts which we cannot manage yet, great potential, great opportunities for continuing the revolution of human consciousness, that we have this great opportunity, this great potential. And she also understood, and this was why she did not allow herself formally to receive baptism, to enter into the church, although she was a deep lover and disciple of Christ, because she said the church is not yet able to see the world as it is. It can't see it with this hope and acceptance and inclusivity. It still is rejecting too many people and conceiving of itself as a little club of the saved, and judging others who are outside of this privileged group. And that's why she said that we need a new form of holiness. a new sanctity appropriate to the modern age. She said it is not enough today for us to be a saint. We have to have a holiness demanded by the present moment and for which there is no precedent. Now, only a very deep contemplative could have the courage to see and express it in that way. At the core of this new holiness is a perception not of the economic globalism or the dangers of globalism or the dangers of multiculturalism, but a perception of the universal. And for the Christian, this is timelessly expressed by St. Paul: in Christ, we are all one. There is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, even mysteriously, neither male nor female. We are all one in Christ. So there are many seeds of hope in our modern insanity: religious and sexual freedom, travel, communication, access to all levels of culture, increasing life expectancy, and freedom from many threats to health. The good values and the opportunities at hand, however, readily degenerate into vices, because like all virtues, they can be perverted by excess or abuse. But the contemplative mind can resolutely and unflinchingly look into viciousness and malice and darkness and insanity. We can look into it, face it, and we can extract virtue from it. We can see the good. In times of madness, we have to concentrate on sanity. In times of evil, we have to pay attention to the good. Only with this vision can the human being escape from pessimism, fatalism, despair, and the suicidal tendencies of self-harm to ourselves or others. So only with this contemplative consciousness, this universal vision of reality, can we move from passivity, and we're becoming politically passive and economically passive, into constructive action and hope. So contemplation restores sanity and it heals the insane, because it is itself healthy with the sanity of the real. According to Thomas Aquinas, contemplation is the simple enjoyment of the truth. And I won't try and explain that, because it was very clearly expressed this morning meditating with those young people. The simple enjoyment of the truth. To be contemplative is an end in itself, because it is what we are designed for and most fully flourish in. And tomorrow I'd like to explore with you a little more the meaning of contemplation in this understanding, and also of the need and the opportunity for the Christian today to become fully contemplative. What I'd like to do now is invite you to a little time of contemplative work, of meditation, and I'd like to share with you a very simple way. This is a way that has become central to my life and the life of some of you, many of you perhaps here. A very simple way of prayer. I'm going to give you a chance to stand up in a minute. A very simple way of prayer, and I'm not saying this is the only way to heaven, or that it's the best ticket to heaven, or that you are in club class if you meditate this way. So I'm not putting down any other way. One should, I think, no contemplative would ever criticize or judge another person's way of prayer. But I would like to share with you a very ancient, very universal, very simple way of prayer, the prayer of the heart, that we can truly accept and understand today as a way of contemplation. But before we do that, maybe you'd just like to stand and have a little stretch. This would also be a good preparation for us as we lead into meditation. So let's take a moment to have a little stretch. If you like to do it this way, you put your hands up above your head and reach for the stars while your feet are being pulled down by gravity to the center of the earth. And that is stretching. And then you can, without punching your neighbor's eyes out, move your hands to your side like this. This is one of the most ancient postures of prayer. We see it in the catacombs. This is how Christians pray, with their arms outstretched. So again, feel the wonderful expansion of the chest and of the mind that comes with this posture. And then bring your hands together slowly over your heart in this other, more familiar perhaps, posture of prayer, which is also for half the world a way of greeting God in others, of showing respect and care and reverence for others. Also a symbol of our coming together in this simple gesture of integration. So you could let your arms drop by your side, move your shoulders around a little bit. Stand for a moment and be aware of your breath. This is a little exercise that you may find, many of you do already perhaps, a good way of leading into a meditation period. We should never think of meditation as something we do in our head. There's a website that I think some people find helpful called Headspace, but meditation really isn't about headspace. It's about the heart, and the heart is the symbol of the whole person, the point of integration of body and mind and spirit. That's why we call meditation the prayer of the heart. So just turn your attention to your breath for a few moments. Feel the breath coming into you as the gift of life that it is. Mysterious gift that reveals the giver to us. And because it is a gift, we cannot hold it or possess it. We cannot turn our breath into a possession. We have to let go. We have to breathe out. And that is a wonderful expression of the meaning of meditation. Accepting the gift of your being, but returning that gift. John Maine said that meditation is as natural to the spirit as breathing is to the body. So let's sit down. The basic rule of posture is simply to sit with your back straight. And St. Bernard said, we sit for meditation because it is halfway between standing up and lying down. When you're standing up, you're delivering a talk, you're doing something. When you're lying down, you're about to drop off to sleep. So sitting allows us to be alert and relaxed at the same time, but only if we take a few moments to sit comfortably with your back straight. So I don't know how comfortable, this chair is very comfortable, maybe more comfortable than your pews, but that's because I'm the speaker, so I get a comfortable chair. Put your feet on the ground. You could put your hands on your lap or on your knees. Relax your shoulders. Relax the muscles of your face, your jaw, your forehead. And the essence of prayer, according to the great teachers of the Christian desert, is to lay aside your thoughts. Prayer, they said, is the laying aside of thoughts. Now that's very important, because it does not say you have to eliminate your thoughts, or fight them, or block them, or blank them out. You can't do that by will. So what we can do is to lay them aside. Just let them hit the shore of your mind like waves on the seashore. But the way we lay them aside and make this human pilgrimage from the mind to the heart is to take our attention off the thoughts. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, fantasies, fears, insights, solutions, daydreams, compulsive, neurotic patterns of thought. We take our attention off all of this many layered phenomenon of thought. And we do that in this way, in a very simple way, by taking a single word. This is called the prayer of one word. And repeating this word, this sacred word, this mantra, this prayer word, by repeating this word continuously in the mind and heart during the whole time of the meditation. So you don't have to fight your thoughts, because if you try you will lose, and no one likes to be a loser. So don't try to fight your thoughts, but give everything to the saying of the word. And when your mind wanders, which it will inevitably, when the mind gets caught up in thoughts, and as soon as you realize that this is what's happened, you drop the thought like a hot potato, and you return to your word. So this is a very simple, I don't say it's easy, but a very simple art of prayer. To say the word with attention and with love, but to say it faithfully. Say the word gently, without force. Say it simply, like a child, without analyzing or evaluating. Listen to the word as you say it. Now, choosing the word is important because we ideally stay with the same word all the way through the meditation and from day to day, every meditation. We'll talk later about why we do that. So we could take the name Jesus, a very ancient Christian mantra, or the word Abba, for example. The word I would recommend is the word Maranatha. Maranatha is the oldest Christian prayer. It's a sacred word. It's in the language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic. It means, "Come, Lord." St. Paul ends the first letter to the Corinthians with it. But we're not thinking about the meaning of the word as we say it. So the word I recommend is Maranatha. 4 syllables. Ma, ra, na, tha. Ma, ra, na, tha. So close your eyes lightly. Sit as still as you can, as quietly as you can. Relax. And gently begin to say your word. Silently, interiorly, in mind and heart. And listen to the word as you say it. Articulate it clearly in your mind. Ma, ra, na, tha. Don't complicate it. Just say it naturally. Ma, ra, na, tha. And we can lead into the meditation now with this prayer. Heavenly Father, open our hearts to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. Lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha. Ma, ra, na, tha. So let's conclude with these words from the Gospel of John. He said to them, "Peace is my parting gift to you. My own peace, such as the world cannot give. Set your troubled hearts at rest and banish your fears. I have spoken these words to you so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete.